of the Board of Supervisors, and let's do that now so we know what we're dealing with and the issues of consequences and concern to Black San Diegans that they have the power to address. The 5-member County Board of Supervisors runs the largest governmental body in the region with a budget of some $6 billion with the B dollars and a broad range of responsibilities critical to the quality of life for the estimated 3.3 million residents in San Diego County. These responsibilities include, but are not limited to, public safety services, including the Sheriff's Department, the District Attorney, and the county jails. County health services, including services for people experiencing mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and people experiencing homelessness. Administration of Medi-Cal, Affordable Care Act, CalFresh, and CalWorks programs. Our elections and our voter registration rolls, Section 8 housing programs, and land use in unincorporated areas of the county. Until most recently, however, there were no term limits for this office. That changed in 2010. In fact, the last time that I had the honor of moderating this forum, serving as your moderator for this forum, was for the open District 4 seat. This election, voters will fill an unprecedented 3 open seats on the County Board of Supervisors. This shift is something that we should be very interested in, because this new board will lead San Diego County out of the COVID-19 crisis, and through their budget and policy decisions, shape how we recover and rebuild as a region. In numerical order there, by districts, the candidates are, in District 1, Ben Hueso and Nora Vargas. District 1 covers San Diego's South Bay, which concludes communities from Chula Vista, National City, to Coronado. District 2, we have Joel Anderson. Steve Voss is not in attendance. District 2 is our largest in terms of land county, and that includes communities like Poway and El Cajon, Lemon Grove, etc. And District 3, we have Kristen Gaspar, who is not in attendance, and Tara Lawson Reamer. And District 3 covers North County Coastal, which includes Tierra Santa, right up the coast, University City, Encinitas, and etc. So we welcome you, candidates, and look forward to a candid conversation. BAPAC San Diego Candidate Forum Committee Chair Soleil Wallen-Baumir will now share how this important forum came together and our rules of engagement for the afternoon. Soleil?
Thank you, Cheryl. The BAPAC San Diego Candidate Forum Committee interviewed local subject matter experts to compile the questions that will be asked, and if time permits, there will also be questions submitted by the audience towards the end. The committee would like to give thanks to the subject matter experts and the audience for their contribution to this event. Also, the committee would like to give a special thanks to BAPAC San Diego Chair Ellen Nash and Vice Chair Elise Pipkin-Allen for their extraordinary work in making this event possible. Regarding the format, the candidates will have 1 minute for their opening statements, 1 minute for their responses, and 1 minute for their closing statements. The moderators for today's forum will be special guest moderators Cheryl Alethea Phelps, fellow committee member Kevin White, and myself. Now I will go ahead and turn it over to Kevin to start us off. Kevin, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Soleil. We'll start with the candidate introductions, beginning with Nora Vargas. Nora?
Mute.
Nora. You're on mute, Nora.
There you go.
You went on mute again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I've been having problems with my audio. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon. Thank you to BAPAC, Ms. Ellen, Ms. Elise, and everyone who's hosting this forum today. I decided to run for the County Board of Supervisors because I really want to continue to make a difference. This isn't about politics for me. This is very personal. I was raised here in South County. I attended local public schools, Southwestern Community College, where I now serve as the president of the governing board. For more than 20 years, I've dedicated my life to removing barriers for underserved communities through civic engagement, public policy, and community organizing. I have experience working at all three levels of government, and as a healthcare and education advocate, I'm the right person for the role. Our communities in District 1 have been disproportionately impacted by this pandemic. I think the virus has really magnified the housing and wage inequities and the health disparities in many of our zip codes. As your county supervisor, mitigating the impacts of the pandemic and focusing on economic recovery will be my priority. I'm committed to ensuring we continue to fight for equity and inclusivity at the county, and I want to be your partner as we create systemic change. I will lead with intention and courage, providing our communities with the bold, forward-thinking leadership they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ben Hueso? Ben, you're on.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope everyone is staying safe. It's really tough times, especially to be running for office. So I appreciate everybody and what you're doing in this forum. I'm running for county supervisor to make San Diego a place where every single individual from all walks of life has an equal opportunity to achieve the American dream. I was born and raised in San Diego. I have 4 boys that I'm also raising. So running for the county means everything about preparing San Diego to be the kind of future, San Diego's future to be the kind of place where my kids could have a better opportunity at getting the kind of prosperity they need. I want that for everybody in San Diego. I have dedicated my life to improving San Diego, fighting for the most vulnerable communities at every step of the way of my public service. I also stood up to Trump and his discriminatory tactics and really working against all the policies that have been making California the largest economy in the country. And I made it possible for our state to sue Trump 85 times. And we, through our Latino caucus, we also sued Trump on the issue of the immigration question on the
Thank
census.
you.
And we won that through our caucus. I stood with Governor Newsom and the Senate in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, bringing over 54 million to San Diego and adopting.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. And adopting a $202 billion budget that protects core services, strengthens our state's emergency response capacity, and promoting economic recovery for the future, especially for small businesses that have been hurt so hard. I have the experience to lead the county, having served as a council member, council president, chairman of the Latino caucus, on the assembly and in the Senate, on the Coastal Commission, on the
Thank you so much, Ben. But
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I went over on time. Thank you.
Okay, so please, for candidates, please keep in mind the time limit. We have a lot of important questions we'd like to get through.
I misunderstood. I thought when you were saying thank you, you were thanking me for all the things I did. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll move on with that. Joel?
I've lived in East County most of my life. I ran for office because I wanted to improve and lift the people in improve the community and lift people in my community. If you read the Union Tribune, you know nothing of me. I did over 400 bills, joined or co-authored with Democrats. I think it's really important that we focus on the problems that we face and try to solve them. And Ben can attest to 4 years I didn't participate in the Republican caucus. And I defer my remaining minute. Oh, by the way, BAPAC, thank you so much for putting this on and inviting me to it. I really appreciate it. I think it's really hard in COVID to get our messages out. And I think it's important for everybody to show up and be participant. And I defer the rest of my time to Ben.
All right. Tara?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for convening us and organizing us. It's an honor to be here and see so many friends. I think we all know what's at stake in this election. It's the future of San Diego in so many ways. I'm a third-generation San Diegan. My grandpa was a Marine stationed at Camp Pendleton, and I grew up all over the county. And I'm running for county supervisor because I think that we need a San Diego that works for all of us. And we can see at this moment in this pandemic how important the investments in public health and human services need to be. how much we need to prioritize ensuring that the county delivers for our most vulnerable members of our population. I'm really excited to do the work. I'm sort of embarrassed and ashamed that my opponent is not here today to talk to BAPAC, which I'm really looking forward to partnering with you all to bring San Diego to the next century, because we've been caught in the last century for far too long. So thank you very much for having me, and great to see so many friends.
Okay, thank you for those introductions. Now we'll get into the questions. The first one I'll have, and the first one reads, racial disparities are a major issue in the county, particularly as it relates to Black people in getting county contracts, employment in various county departments, and to a certain extent in county supervisors' offices. Do you view this as an issue? And if so, what will you do as a supervisor to address these issues? So I'd like to start this one with Joel.
Well, I'll do what I did in the legislature. You know, my staff reflected my community. Everybody worked for me. The other thing is I support the office racial, gosh, I turned 60 this year. Now I have to struggle for words where I didn't have to before. But the racial equity, the office of racial equity, I think that was a step in the right direction. Look, people have got to be more engaged. Sadly, we had so many people on the Board of Supervisors for so long that I think that they lost track that they represent us and they represent our communities. And instead, they were more protective of the bureaucracy than working for fairness throughout the community.
Okay, thank you. Nora? You're on mute.
Dear Lord. Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that question. I think the best way to start this is by saying that Black Lives Matter, and that for centuries, the Black community has suffered from the inequities of a system. The movement itself has awakened our country, and particularly addressing some of the racist systems that we've been facing. I have been a social justice advocate throughout my history. I've been a champion of equity and inclusivity. I'm committed to continue doing that work as the next supervisor. I want to make sure that our County of San Diego boards and commissions are representative of our diverse communities, to create county-wide equity initiatives that are implemented in all departments, including my own staff. I think that the County of San Diego has a lot of work to address inequities in employment and awarding public contracts. That's why I supported Dr. Weber's ACA 5. I was an advocate, and as a trustee at Southwestern College, made sure that all of the colleges in our district actually were advocating for it. I'm looking forward to being a champion of making sure it passes in November. And I think that's the first step to ensuring that we're leveling the playing field to minority contractors, to Black people who should be having these leadership jobs and should be able to contract for these opportunities. And so I've always made it a priority in my role, in every role that I've always served on, of making sure that there's inclusivity and diversity, and I will continue to do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nora. Ben?
Thank you very much. It is an issue, a very big issue, and it needs to be addressed, and I will work very hard to make sure we do address it. We don't only need a county that has an employee workforce that mirrors the community that it serves, but we also need to ensure that we have a diverse workforce in most important positions, the leadership positions, the directors' positions, the ones that direct departments at the delivery of service. I support diversity. Diversity is what makes California strong. It makes us the country's largest economy, the largest economy of any state in the world, because of our diversity. I joined Assemblymember Holden this year on a bill. When he was chair of the Black Caucus and I was chair of the Latino Caucus, we went to Silicon Valley and started holding them accountable for not having people of color on their boards. This year, we're actually moving a measure, a very important one, that will diversify California corporate boards. Banks, corporations, Facebook, Google, they need to have people of color on their boards. And that's a very important law that we're moving forward, and I will work on other similar measures to make sure our county is well represented in this area.
All right, thank you, Ben. Tara?
I just want to begin by acknowledging that we have a lot of work to do in this country on racial justice, and that work has to start at every level and has to continue at every level. And there's no question that there's a critical role that the county must play in advancing that work. You asked about staffing, and of course, staffing is vitally important, and that includes staffing of offices, but also ensuring that we have racial equity and really thinking about doing anti-racist work throughout the county bureaucracy. But it also impacts how we do our programming and ensuring that when we are thinking about who has access to services at the county, that we're really focused on inclusion and making sure that every community has a seat at the table and has a voice in the work that we're doing.
Okay, thank you. As a follow-up, and this kind of includes some of the responses you've just given, but the follow-up question is, what is your position on Black Lives Matter, and what are your plans to ensure equitable hiring and promotion of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the county's workforce? And we'll start with Tara first.
Black Lives Matter. I think it's been said and needs to be said again and again and again, because we have faced a crisis in this country that has been too long unaddressed, and there's absolutely work that we need to continue to do. I am so grateful and proud of our young folks who are out there in the streets and advancing this issue with moral clarity and ensuring that it cannot get ignored. And that is the work that we must continue to do in the county. And there's a lot of it. I mean, we have to start really from top to bottom, and it impacts every department and every aspect of the work. But really engaging and ensuring that we bring to the work an anti-racist lens, and that's at the foreground of how we think about staffing and hiring and equity.
Thank you. Ben?
Thank you. I do support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I do plan to work to help protect African Americans from abuse and from racism. I believe that we need to end systemic racism at large in our society. So it's something that we need to work on. As a senator, I supported many pieces of legislation that attempt to level off the disproportionate impact on African Americans and other minorities in our community. We have, for example, we have supported mandatory sentencing. We have supported ending life sentences, for example, in California. We've helped incarcerated youth get a way out of jail by providing them support services and education and help. We've done bail reform in the state of California, which is huge, among other things that we've worked on. We need to continue to work hard to make sure that we provide people up to a pathway to opportunity in our county and in our state at large.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Joe?
I think it's easy to say that you support Black Lives Matter, but our actions have to reflect it. I rewrote the murder felony rule with Nancy Skinner. We had a law in place that was targeting Blacks, and it wasn't fair, it wasn't just, it was wrong. And I rewrote that law. In fact, by rewriting that law, the DAs refused to endorse me, although they had supported me in the past, because they clung to this old law that targeted Blacks and was wrong. During the Schwarzenegger time, he issued 450,000 IOUs totaling $2.7 billion. I wrote a bill because I knew that those IOUs would affect minorities greater than anyone else, because most of the companies, small businesses that are working for the state, are minority owned. And what the bill said was that you may use your IOU to pay your taxes and pay your fees to the state, because the state at the time was not accepting its own IOU. And Ben, quick shout out to you for co-authoring that bill and helping me with it. I really appreciate it. But you know, it's easy to say things. It's hard to actually do them. And that's what I've done.
All right, thank you. Nora?
Yes, so absolutely, actions speak louder than words. And I have been a champion of equity and diversity initiatives through every level of role that I've played in, either as an executive at Planned Parenthood, as chair of governance at CalSTRS. I've been, someone who has been absolutely on the front lines advocating for our communities. And as I mentioned before, Black Lives absolutely matter. I am really proud of the work that I've done, but I think that it is our priority, it is our opportunity for us to actually take on these issues head on. And as an elected member and president of the Southwestern College Governing Board, I have worked to address anti-Blackness on our campus through the adoption of equity-focused policies. And I've developed strategic goals and objectives to ensure representation of the Black community at all levels. I'm happy to report that we've actually been able to change really clear policies that impact our African-American community. I've held numerous, roundtables and opportunities, and I'm really proud that we just most recently hired our permanent Office of Equity and Engagement executive, and representation matters. And so it's what you've done and the work that I've done on the ground, I think matters and is critical and important at CalSTRS. I made the motion and led the efforts to divest from private prisons, which directly impact our Black and brown boys. And so I am looking forward to doing that work. Thank you.
All right. I thank you all for your answers and responses. And now I'd like to turn it over to Cheryl.
Candidates, thank you. Candidates, widespread protests following the unconscionable killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others has called attention to over-policing in communities of color and demands to, quote, defund the police, unquote. In San Diego County, a Campaign Zero study released last December used the Sheriff Department's own data to document racial disparities and how laws are enforced in our county. I just want to get a baseline, so I'm going to ask a few yes or no questions. I just want a yes or no answer. We'll start, we'll go in this order. Ben, Nora, Joel, Tara, ready? Yes or no? You can all unmute.
I'm so sorry, but for me, about half your question got mumbled.
I will be asking yes or no questions. So if you'll keep your mic open and just, I'm going to ask the question and then I'm only asking for a yes or no answer. You ready,
Great.
Tara?
Yes, thank you.
And then the order that will take them, Ben, Nora, Joel, Tara. First question, do you believe Black people are over-policed in San Diego County? Yes or no? Yes or no question. Ben, do you believe Black people are over-policed in San Diego County?
Over-policed? I don't know if I can
Nora,
answer.
yes or no question. Do you believe
Yes.
Black people are over-policed in San Diego County?
Yes, absolutely.
Joel,
I don't know.
Tara,
Yes.
Ben, first, do you agree with the recommendations in the Campaign Zero study?
I haven't read the Campaign Zero study. so-
Nora,
Yes.
Joel,
I haven't read it.
Tara.
Some of them.
Third question, are you aware of local efforts to reduce the role, responsibilities, and presence of law enforcement in communities of color and on our campuses?
Say that again.
Are you aware of local efforts to reduce the role, responsibilities, and presence of law enforcement in communities of color and on our school campuses? Yes or no?
Yes, I'm aware.
Nora,
Yes.
Joel,
I'm not aware.
Tara.
Yes.
Will you vote to approve $3 million to make a restorative justice alternative to youth incarceration? Ben?
That sounds, again, I need to know the specifics of the plan.
Thank you. Nora?
Yes, but we should do more.
Joel?
I've consistently supported restorative justice.
Thank you. Tara?
I strongly support restorative justice.
Will you demand the DA, this is the last one, investigate law enforcement involved shootings and deaths, and when justified, insist that they prosecute?
Yes.
Nora?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Tara?
Yes.
Okay, here's a question. What will be your approach to balancing people's legitimate public safety needs with calls for deeper investments in community-based, non-law enforcement interventions? Do you think these investments are necessary? Why or why not? We'll start with Nora.
Absolutely. You know, I think that there's, as supervisors, we have an opportunity to look at programming through the budget process. I most recently supported Supervisor Fletcher's recommendations to really focus on better healthcare outcomes when it comes to our prisons, and how do we make sure that the right people are taking care of our communities. And so I absolutely believe that we have an opportunity to work together with law enforcement to make sure that our communities are safe. But at the same time, when our communities need responses for health or mental illness, that it's the right people who are responding, which is in this case, healthcare providers. As an incoming supervisor, I'm going to ensure that social services and prevention are prioritized, because in the end, our budget should be reflective of our values. And I want to make sure that we secure the well-being of our residents. I do believe that we have to end police brutality and excessive force. We have the right to ask questions. I'm doing a lot of work at Southwestern College to really focus on community policing and what that looks like. And I want to be a partner in the community to continue to do that, so that we have a good balance and people stay safe as well.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you. Joel, please. If you anyone can let me know if they need me to repeat the question.
Would you mind?
Of course not.
Repeating?
Of course not. What will be your approach to balancing people's legitimate public safety concerns and needs with calls for deeper investments in community-based, non-law enforcement interventions? Do you think these investments are necessary? Why or why not?
So let me just start off by saying this is part of the core of why I'm running. And a 1 minute does not do it justice. I could give you a half an hour on all this. In the legislature, you know, a person who runs for office, they promise you the world tomorrow. You should always ask them what they did yesterday. And yesterday, I worked very hard in the legislature for community policing, from restorative justice, for getting the mental health necessary. Ben and I joint authored a bill with one of our colleagues to bring $200 million in a pilot program to San Diego County to address this very issue. We could be doing so much more. And this is where Nathan Fletcher is 100% correct on his approach towards mental health and how we need to be using that. My time's up.
Thank you, Joel, and thank you for respecting our time limitations. Tara.
I'm going to be honest, I can't believe that this is a debate, right? I mean, it seems to me so clear and so obvious that these are investments that need to be priorities. It helps everyone. It helps all members of the community. And certainly it would be one of the things I would prioritize as a county supervisor.
Thank you, Tara. And Ben.
We need to be prepared to address the needs of the day. And of course, public health and public safety are some of the most important aspects of providing services through the government. So we have to make sure that, look, if we have more police than we need, we need to address that. If we don't have enough, we need to address that too. I authored a bill, Kathy's Law, that of course we haven't been able to implement because in certain aspects of public safety have been gutted. And this is of course violence towards women. And if we have an uptick of violence towards women, we have to make sure that we have ability to respond to that. Generally speaking, I can say that we have to look at where we need more support in providing support for people with addiction problems, supporting with people with mental health problems. We really have to look at this strategically in terms of what the need is in our society and budget accordingly. And our budgeting dollars don't have to be just to load up a department's budget. And we need to have a strategy on how that money is going to be spent and how we're going to reduce the incidence of crime in our community, how we're going to reduce the incidence of mental illness and reduce the incidences of addiction in our community to make sure that our government is properly serving the people of our region.
Excellent. Thank you all for your answers.
Thank you all. Thank you, Cheryl. How will you balance the importance of investing in community-based organizations to do important work versus outsourcing, such as outreach. And we're going to start with Tara.
I'll be honest, I don't understand the question. Balance investing versus outreach?
So investing in the community-based organizations versus looking in LA County for things that can be done within the community by the community themselves. So what will you do in your power and in your position to use the community more in your office?
So, I mean, I'll be honest, I think one of the reasons I'm here, and I think is spending a lot of time talking to folks on the campaign trail, is because I think that starts with relationships. It starts with listening. It starts with me coming to you and saying, what do you all need? How can I be a better partner? I'm not thinking that I'm going to walk in with all the answers, but thinking that my plan and how I will represent our community is as a representative who's there to listen and have an open door. Make sure you all have my phone number, my mobile phone number, and can call me anytime and say, look, I see this going on. I have a better idea of how we could do things differently. And so we can make it happen together.
Joel?
I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but let me just say this. Our social workers should be coming from our communities, and they should be reflective of our communities. We should be investing in our local nonprofits. But I will say on the flip side, if there's something that's working and we're not having success with it, I want the best ideas. I want the best people here working in our communities, lifting our people, and making it a better place. Now, having said that, it's hard to imagine that somebody else can do it better than we can do it ourselves. And you know, I've done a lot with pastor outreaches, and you know, so many of the answers are already out there. They're just not getting the support that they need. And I think that's going to change, because I'm going to spend more time, just like I did in the legislature. I had 8 coffees every year in the community. I had open house where over 5,000 people would show up. My door was always open, and I was always looking to partner. And it's reflected in how many bills I did across party lines. So I think that the answers are going to be coming from our own districts and making sure that we fund it.
Thank you. Nora?
So I'll start off by saying that the reason why I'm running is because I do want to bring the community voices to the table, right? For over 30 years, I've dedicated my life to doing this work on the ground. It's what I've done: community organizing, community engagement, budgeting, prioritizing. How do we address some of the disparities in our communities? And that's what I'm going to do. You know, unfortunately, this Board of Supervisors, for the exception of Supervisor Fletcher just 2 weeks ago, we're trying to outsource our healthcare nurses so that they can provide services in the county jails. And that's unacceptable, because we know that privatizing doesn't work. I also know that, our county employees are not right now being treated as well as they should, right? We should be competitive employers. We should be making sure that they have wages and the benefits that they need to be able to support themselves, and that they should be able to have everything they need. I'm not waiting to get elected to do this work. I started Conexiones because there was a void in the county around in language, making sure that we had information in Spanish for our communities. And so I created a platform to be able to bring people together to share that information. I brought together community nonprofit groups who are social service agents, providing the services, asking them and working with them together. And that now has created a partnership with the supervisors to do this work. So community is where I come from, and community will be a representative when I become a supervisor. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Ben?
Thank you. I think the nonprofits and our grassroots organizations are an essential part of our delivery of services. They should be treated as such. I founded 2 nonprofits in my community over 20 years ago: Historic San Diego Community Development Corporation, Inner City Business Association. I served on the board of the historic Sherman Heights Community Center. And as an elected, I also worked with Urban Corp, providing youth and education and a job and job training and a paycheck while they go through that process. Community-based organizations are essential, and I have worked with them in every step of the way as an elected, supporting organizations like South Bay Community Services, Hearts and Hands, Casa Familiar, Barrio Station, so many nonprofits. The Neighborhood House, I've worked with them as well, supporting them in their delivery of services across San Diego County. These organizations need to be supported because they're connected to the people of our community closer than the county is. And one of the things that I have found while I'm running for, I'm sorry, okay.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much for your responses.
Hey, I'd like to ask the next question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. With COVID-19 and the economic devastation that has been caused by it, a lot of other important issues to the Black community have been pushed to the back burners. And here's one. Black women are overrepresented in human trafficking. They are prosecuted and often incarcerated once recovered by law enforcement. What would you do to make sure that Black girls are not criminalized for the assaults that they have had to endure? And I'd like to start with Joe.
Well, actually, I joint authored, and I can't remember the bill number, that decriminalized it. We had been treating these women as if they were prostitutes by choice, as opposed to being victims. And I joint authored the bill that changed that status. It's crazy to me that the DA's office fought it, and yet I do not see how it's fair or right to these poor women who have been used the way that they have been. They are victims, and they need, we're talking about some of these teenagers are children. We're not talking about 18-year-olds. We're talking about 13, 14-year-olds, 12-year-olds. It's absolutely outrageous, and we should be doing more to help and support those people. I cannot imagine the hell that they've gone through.
Thank you. Tara? Tara?
Sorry, my audio. When we think about the disparities in all aspects of our criminal justice system, this is one of the ones I think was striking, right? Where victims are treated as criminals. And we have to do just so much better. I think much of this definitely comes from the state level in terms of the kinds of legal reform, legislative reforms that need to be advanced. But on the county level, we can do a lot better at the DA's office in terms of what kinds of cases we prosecute and how we choose to allocate resources, but also with the sheriffs in terms of how we treat and investigate things that might seem like prostitution, but are actually pretty abhorrent crimes of human trafficking, and to make sure that our sheriffs have the right kind of training to spot and identify trafficking crimes, and that is the focus of the investigations, and that we're not making victims into criminals.
Okay, thank you. Ben?
Yeah, this is the area where I've been kind of talking about where the county hasn't really invested enough resources. COVID has definitely exacerbated this problem having to do with human trafficking. The other is domestic violence against women. During COVID, actual domestic violence of women increased 20%. And the response to that has really been the only ones that are required to respond to this in law enforcement. And really, they're really not equipped or even qualified. So we do need an arm of the county that can provide support to these families that are going through this problem. And of course, one of them has to be providing training and support for people to enter a job and to become independent financially. And so definitely COVID has provided a whole host has exposed so many problems in our society that need to be addressed. And we do need to tap into more funding to help fund these programs. And it is there. The state allocated $81 million that's available. There are several federal funds that the county has not tapped into. We have lost billions of dollars over the years because there has been a lack of reaching out to eligible residents that qualify for these programs, that could be served by these programs. If we don't have a program in place, there is no way we could bring these resources from the state and federal government into our community. It'll be good to provide support to these families, but it'll also be good at injecting money into our local economy and helping build it.
Thank you. Nora?
Thank you for that question. I think we really need to focus on a comprehensive solution that really focuses on the victims, right? We need to make sure that we have treatment and therapeutic support, that treatment care is something that we have that includes wraparound services for them. I think it's been something that the district attorney's office has been working with. I know that when I was at Planned Parenthood, we did a lot of work together in education, really informing and partnering with our schools so that young people knew what was happening, because sometimes there was a lot of misinformation out there for some of our young folks. I can assure you that, one of the things that I would focus on is making sure that there's resources for a specialized unit who works with the folks who know how to do this work well, which is our existing nonprofits that are doing exceptional work and trying to reach out and help our communities to make sure that women or young women who have been trafficked have an opportunity to continue on. And I've had that opportunity on Conexiones. I've had a couple of them join me, and they have talked about the need for education and for them to be able to continue on so that the stigma is no longer with them. One added addition to this is that we do live in a binational community. And so there is a real there is also the piece of the binational community and the human trafficking that's taking place, and we can talk about it for hours. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'd like to turn it over to Cheryl for the next question.
Hi, thank you.
It was asked and answered, so I'll pass it on.
So the next question is going to be, according to last year's homeless census, Black people make up less than 6% of the county's population, but 22% of the county's homeless population. What is your plan to address homelessness? And we're going to start it off with Kara.
I only have a minute. It's a huge question, a huge problem. And we need to engage on this from so many aspects. So just let me focus on one piece that I think is very central to the county's work, is we need wraparound services. And the cities alone can't address homelessness, even if they're allocating space and beds, because folks need services to get back on their feet, and that's the role of the county. And the county has just refused to do the work and make the investments in those kinds of wraparound services that we need to make sure that people can get off the street and back on their feet. So that would be my number one priority, partnering with the cities to make those investments in wraparound services. We also need to be looking at increasing affordable housing options, and the county needs to take a leading role in that.
Thank you, Tara. Nora?
Thank you for that question. I really believe that this has to be a regional effort. There are a lot of committees and commissions that are taking place separately in our different cities, and also we have one at the county, but we really need to put some teeth behind it. There's still 8,000 homeless folks and shelter folks in our communities, right? And I think it's important to allocate resources to not only appropriate departments, but that staff that are trained to really work directly with folks, either because they have the mental health issues and they need the services, the wraparound services, and we also need to make investments in preventative measures that prevent people from becoming homeless, because that's another big piece. We need to make sure we have individual case navigators to work with our homeless population to make sure that we help them transition in. And any type of transition that we have needs to make sure that we create a pathway for our unsheltered community for home treatment and access to healthcare. I really think that the model that that's happening in the San Isidro Senior Center, across from Southwestern College right now, which is a public-private partnership, is a great partnership that we should look at for future opportunities for the county.
Thank you for your response, Nora. Ben?
We need a plan to address chronic homelessness. A study followed several homeless people around for a year and found that many of them repeatedly went into emergency rooms. And one individual, and most of them had bills that were very similar. One individual racked up a $1.5 million bill. After going to the hospital for service a full year and having racked up a bill of $1.5 million, at the end of that person was still homeless, still had an addiction or a mental illness problem. And that goes to show you that we're misappropriating funds. Where we do have them, we're spending them the wrong way. The most anemic part of our county government system is our mental health services department and the health services portion that deals with addiction. Those are areas where I plan to invest more money to ensure that we have a plan to address chronic homelessness in our county, and that we get those people off the streets and into a job and into a home by providing them the kind of medical attention that they need. And that's generally our approach to solving homelessness in San Diego. It's really not being done in any part of the country, and I want San Diego County to be the first.
Thank you so much. Joel?
You know what, everybody so far has said, everything they've said I've agreed with. I will say this though, I did a bill with Senator Jim Bell to give $200 million to San Diego County in a pilot program for mental health, and they chose only to spend $3 million of it, and the rest got returned to the state. You know, I don't believe the Board of Supervisors to date are as focused and as serious about this issue, and I think that everything you've heard from all the other candidates, I agree with for that reason. We need new blood on that board that's going to be focused like a laser to give these wraparound services. And it's not just there. When you think about in terms of foster care, we've got lots of issues with foster care as well. There are nonprofits out there. They're doing a phenomenal job. We've got pastors and others in the community working hard at this, and they need to be at the table. And I would be happy to meet with them on a monthly basis to work through this, because we're not going to do it alone. We're all going to have to work together.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm done. You don't have to give me time.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and give it over to Kevin. Thank you all for your responses to that question.
Okay, this question ties into some of the answers you've just previously given, dealing with mental health. So maybe you can add any other information that you think might be pertinent to this question. Job loss and other means of financial assistance have greatly impacted the mental health conditions of many residents in San Diego County during the COVID-19 pandemic. What steps will you take to ensure that the rapidly deteriorating mental health situation in San Diego County does not become an epidemic all by itself? And I'd like to start with Joe.
So there's a few things. One is the law enforcement's not prepared. They're just not prepared. And I think right now we have three, I think they're called CERT teams, where they send out psychologists with them to help handle mental health calls. There's no reason why there isn't three for every law enforcement agency. 3 for a county of over 3 million people makes no sense whatsoever. We have 100 beds right now that are dedicated to mental health. With over 3 million people, that's just not fair, because law enforcement picks somebody up on a 5150 and they end up taking them to the emergency room. That solves no problems. Within 24 to 48 hours, that person's back on the street without the help that they need, and at risk to themselves and risk to others potentially. I fought to put more funding into post. Everyone talks about defunding the police. We need to increase funding for police training. We can't expect people to have sensitivities if they don't have the proper training. I think it's really important. I don't know that we need more law enforcement. We need better law enforcement training time.
Okay, thank you. Tara. Tara, your response?
Yeah, I agree very much with the direction that the board has taken in the last month and a half or so. And I think we need to do much more of that, which is investing in crisis response teams and investing in mental health services as the front lines when it's not a public safety issue. There's a great program in Eugene, Oregon called the Cahoots program, and you have fully staffed crisis response teams who know how to deal with mental health issues, who know how to make sure folks can get access to the services they need, who are the first responders when there's a crisis that does not present a public safety threat. And I think we need much more of that in San Diego.
Thank you, Tara. Ben?
Yes, thank you. I serve on the Mental Health Caucus in the legislature, and we had a hearing where we provided oversight into some of the organizations that provide mental health support services in our state, and they're largely all private. And largely we found that they're most mostly ineffective, and that most people that go through these services end up with mental health problems and no more money in their bank account. So they basically become destitute, trying to get help. And if you look at our counties, I mentioned in my other comments that the county's services in providing mental health support are some of the most scarce or the smallest budgeted area in our county services, one of the most important areas. And so I want to make sure people have a place to go where they can get quality service, and at the end, they're not bankrupt. And so we really need to make this a priority. This is a problem nationwide. Not only is the substance abuse lead to problems with mental health leads to problems with substance abuse as well. My neighbor battled depression for many years, and one day he just called the police, and he thought it was the best way to commit suicide was just to call the police, tell them that he was going to kill his family. They showed up, and when he exited his house, they shot him on the spot. This is something that I've lived through in my life. Instead of providing him a place where he could get services, he basically had one thing to do, and he did it, and it's very sad that he's no longer with his family.
Yeah, that is a sad story. Thank you, Ben. Nora?
Yes, so I would actually venture to say that we actually have a pandemic already when it comes to mental health in our communities. The reality is that if you look at the stigma that comes with mental health and how people make it about only abuse or make it only about issues related, these sort of extreme cases of what's happening, the reality is that many people in our communities face issues around mental health because they don't have access to healthcare. People don't have access to healthcare. And one of the things that I am prioritizing as the next supervisor is to create county school partnerships to ensure that we're providing community-based services and development into our schools, because what we need is to make sure that our young people have access to mental health in their schools. Prevention is what we need to be funding. There is additional dollars from this board has actually allocated additional dollars to Health and Human Services. And so I support that. And I think that's fantastic. But there's more work to be done that has to be culturally competent. We have to make sure that we are providing our young people the information that they need, that we have individual cases to address the needs of our communities. And yes, we need to look at different ways of how we address the crisis. But I do believe that we need to focus on prevention as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl?
Thank you, Kevin. Candidates. COVID has exposed technological disparities between affluent communities and lower income communities, with lower income households being less likely to have broadband access and devices that we all need to stay connected. This will exacerbate disparities in remote learning, training, education, and employment opportunities. We are, simply put, we're all more dependent on tech. So, what is your plan to ensure technological equity across the county? We'll start with Tara.
I'm really glad you asked that question because it's 100% true. The COVID-19 is exacerbating all of these education disparities that were underlying. COVID's really been a stress test on our society, that all the inequities, all the injustices, all the ways in which some people and some communities are more vulnerable than others has now been revealed and is impossible to ignore. And there is nowhere that is more evident than in our schooling, and in the fact that some kids are going to fall so far behind this year, and other kids, I mean, it's going to be rough, but they're really going to be okay. And a lot of that is driven by access to resources and to technology in particular. So I think that the county absolutely has a role to play in partnering with our schools. And I think one of the things I would support as a super is more investment and more funding for technology in our schools. It's not something you can allocate directly as a supervisor, but certainly a bond initiative that we could put on the ballot to bring to voters to do more investments in schools, and funding for schools and tech in schools is something I would support.
Thank you, Tara. I'm going to restate the question. So we'll start, Ben, if you would. What is your plan to address technological equity to ensure that we have technological equity across our region?
Now, technological equity, I would imagine that for me, it's access and making sure that people have access to technology. And I've been working on this for over 5 years as the chair of energy and telecommunications. I authored a bill that would fund more broadband internet into underserved areas, and that's currently working out. I also worked on with the governor this year to make sure that we make technology more accessible to people, low-income people across the state. The Broadband Action Plan is something that I worked on with the governor. It mandates that a minimum, not only are we going to address access, but we're also going to address speeds to make sure that fast internet is provided in low-income communities. I just voted on the budget, which will support $5.8 billion for schools to help with distance learning and learning loss mitigation, which means that for those kids that haven't been able to have access, that it's not only going to fund their access, but also mitigating when they haven't had access and providing them additional educational support services.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. Nora.
Thank you for that question. I do believe that we have an opportunity as a county to look at addressing technological equity as a county as a whole. We're working closely with all of the cities to address this issue. I mean, I'm happy to say to you that as the president of the governing board, I've actually been doing this work on the front lines right now because the pandemic has exacerbated what was going on. And so we were the first college to go into remote learning. We've made every decision to make sure that our young people have access, but it's not just our young people who are our students, but also the people who are providing the classes and all of that. And so what I have found that we need to make sure we have access to technology, to the hardware, and then it can't be just one per family, right? Because many of our families live in one household, they have multiple folks and they don't have enough space. And so if we can build centers where people can come and have access to free internet, access to free, no cost or free computers, and we can do that. We can do that in centers in areas like Barrio Logan. We can do that in San Isidro because we know that, Starbucks does it. Why couldn't the county do that kind of work? It just has taken, what we need is leadership to think outside the box to get this done.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you for your answer. Joel.
You may not like my answer, but as a supervisor, I'm going to defer to the school boards. The people that run for school boards, the trustees, that's their job, that's their focus. And I normally don't step on other people's authority. And I will say this, though, Mayor Vasquez of Lemon Grove and I have walked all over Lemon Grove together. We've had community coffees together, and we've done a big outreach in my district. And not many people have brought this forward. So I think that they're already talking to the school district trustees about these issues. They're not items that were shared with me as a state legislator when I was in the Senate.
Thank you. Thank you for your candor, Joel. Thank you all candidates for your answers. Soleil?
Thank you, Cheryl. Next question that is going to be asked is the flu season is about to be a month or more away. This time last year, no one had even heard of COVID-19. Therefore, we will soon have both COVID-19 and the flu season to deal with. As a candidate, what steps do you advocate the Board of Supervisors to take to head off these two viruses this fall season? We're going to start with Kara.
So I think you got to the heart of what's at stake in this race, which is public health. And we've had a massive, massive failure of investment in public health for a generation at our county board. And this is partly why we're in the situation that we're in today. So I think we need to do a lot more on outreach, making services available, making sure that everyone has access to healthcare. There's a lot of folks in our communities who are eligible for healthcare and they can't access it because they don't even know that they're eligible. And that would go a long way. But we also have to do a lot more not just in terms of outreach, but also in making sure that once folks are in the system, that they can get access to services, and that a lot comes down to funding and prioritization. And I'd like to see a lot more access to, when we talk about flu, vaccinations, and making that available publicly. And when we're talking about coronavirus.
Thank you. Ben?
Yes, thank you. Well, this year I joined the governor in setting aside, first of all, for $400 million to combat the pandemic. But this year we have also are creating a stockpile of N95 masks, PPE, basically enough equipment to hold over and provide protection for the people of our state, especially essential workers in our healthcare workforce. So first of all, we're already budgeting to make sure that we have a strategy to combat not only the flu season, but maybe COVID-2, which could possibly happen. There have already been cases where some individuals have contracted COVID twice, 3 months after getting it once, they get it again. And that's a huge concern going into many months after the pandemic has seen a decline in cases. So in the county, we're going to need two things. We're going to need to make sure we budget responsibly to prepare for the pandemic, but also budget to help provide support for people that are affected financially by it.
Thank you, Ben. Nora?
Yeah, so, as the only candidate with public healthcare background, I would say that first and foremost, we have to make sure that we are partnering with our community healthcare groups who are providing those services already, and making sure that we serve as a real partner as a county, right? I have to be honest with you, the last couple of months, I was able to get additional masks from across America to some of our health centers. And I just think that is wrong. I mean, should be coming from our government. And when our federal government is not responding to us, we should be standing to them and making sure that we're getting those resources into our communities, because shamefully, the people who are on the front lines are the ones that are losing their lives, right? I mean, we can go on and have a big conversation about public health and the disparities, but the county itself is not even taking care of its workers, right? We know that Ms. Rhonda Felders, a social worker who just passed away, who had dedicated all her life to doing this work, passed away doing her job that she loves. We have to protect our county employers, and then make sure at the same time we're providing the service to the people that need it the most, including the vaccinations for the flu.
Thank you, Nora. Joel?
Well, I'd like to start off by doing a shout out to my wife and all the other healthcare COVID providers. I think testing is the key. I think that we need to make testing much more available, and I think that we need to be using evidence-based decision processes. There has a cause and effect, and for us to turn around and have airplanes full of people flying, but not allowing churches to open, we really need to know, when people get off that plane, are they impacted? And if they're not impacted, then are the churches impacted? Because we're making all these judgments and we haven't tested, and we don't even know where the source is coming from. And I think finding out whether restaurants being open is an issue or not, it can't be random. It's got to be evidence-based.
Thank you. Thank you all for your responses. I'm going to go ahead and give it on over to Cheryl for the next question.
Thank you, Soleil. I believe that each of you did in fact say that systemic racism, structural institutional racism is in fact real. Can I get like a nod? Yeah, we're all saying, yeah, that's real.
Absolutely.
Okay. So first question, and I'll have a follow-up after we hear your responses. In your career, what specific efforts have you made to empower and listen to the voices of Black people in your sphere of influence? We'll start this with Nora.
So I'm actually really proud of the work that I've done in each of the organizations that I've worked with, whether it be Planned Parenthood, Southwestern College, CalSTRS. I've been at the forefront making sure that we have representation at all levels. And and when issues have been brought, right, like particularly in Southwestern College, specifically to racism against Black people, we came together as a board and had forums. And sometimes we didn't, people were very direct in what they were saying and the hurt that they were facing. And what we did is created a public policy that was really going to be impactful so that this doesn't continue, because ending hundreds of years of institutional racism cannot be done overnight, but we have to try to do it overnight, because enough is enough and our communities are hurting. So I think that would be one thing that I would highlight. The other one is that at Planned Parenthood, particularly doing a lot of work to efforts to really support legislation across the state related to Black women's mortality rate when it comes to infant care. And to me, that was a priority. We did that work on the ground, and we made sure that we were championing that. In addition to that, bringing resources into Black and African diaspora communities to make sure that we heard from the communities to bring resources and meet communities where they were at. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Ben.
Thank you.
Anyone can let me know if they need me to repeat the question.
First of all, I think the most important thing is to be accessible to leaders and members of the community. And that's what I've worked very hard to be. I've worked with organizations directly, organizations like the Urban League and the Black Contractors Association and our state's Black Caucus to understand issues that are important to the African American community, and supporting bills, working together with bills that create more access to education, scholarships. Joined Holden on a bill. I mentioned that one, but I also working with Steve Bradford on a bill that would create a mandatory ethnic studies requirement at all our public universities in California to make people aware of racism and how we need to combat it and make people understand each other's differences and come to tolerate our differences. But more than anything else, I've always been accessible. I continue to be, and I always will be, to make sure that I listen and not only listen, but respond with real action to help people.
Thank you, Ben. Joel.
Well, I spent 12 years as the vice chair of public safety in the legislature. And, I'm proud of the work I did there. The murder felony rule, changing that was a huge, huge item. And that it was very clear that was unfair to Black youth. The Innocence Project, Justin Brooks and I worked together, and I was proud to get a Legislator Year Award from the Innocence Project because we know that there are people incarcerated who are innocent, and we should be doing everything we can to get them the justice that they deserve. I'm very proud to have been named an honorary Tuskegee Airman. And when I found out that I had Tuskegee Airmen living in my district, I renamed I-15 Tuskegee Airman Highway. We were the third state in the nation. These men fought under Jim Crow laws, and yet they did so much for our country. I wanted every young person driving down 15 who was on their phone to quickly Google and find out who they were, because they're certainly not going to find it listening to videos. So I wanted to make sure that we put a focus on lifting people in our community who are special and who have made us a better country.
Thank you for your answer, Joel. Tara.
I've made this an issue and throughout my career and much of my work, but I want to just talk briefly about two places and times where this was a core focus of what I was working on. One was work I did with the ACLU on disparate sentencing and overturning some laws in New York when I was living in New York at the time that gave a 15 times longer sentence for crack cocaine than for powder cocaine for the same amount of a drug. And that it just vastly disproportionately impacted our Black communities. And we succeeded. We overturned that law. And that was a huge victory. So that was something I'm very proud of. And that work on something I'm very proud of. Another time that this was a core focus of my work was when I was organizing work against predatory lending and redlining by our big banks. And I think we can all see the ways in which decades and decades of predatory lending and redlining have decimated our communities. And I was involved in organizing a successful campaign to roll back predatory lending by some of our biggest banks, especially Citigroup.
Excellent. And thank you all for your answer to this question. Here's my follow-up. Feel free to name drop. You know, who are you talking to? Who do you look to for insight and guidance on issues of consequence or concern to Black people in this region? We'll start with Tara. Who's on your list?
Well, some of the folks are actually in this room, so thank you for your thoughts and your guidance, and for all the work that you do in leading our community. Someone who's not here is Genevieve, who's been a great friend and an advisor in her work and her views, especially around criminal justice reform. So another person who is not in our community, but I think they bring a lot to bear generally on these issues across our country, is Sean King. So it's a person I've been speaking with. So I do think I look to you all for the leadership, and I am grateful for the work that you've done and continuing to advise me in how we shape and reshape our community.
Thank you. Joel, who do you turn to? Who has your ear on issues of concern and consequence to Black people in San Diego County?
Well, my cell phone is on the ballot every time I run, so I'm pretty open to anybody who wants to pick up the phone. But most recently, I've had some long conversations with Kenya Taylor, who ran in this race against me. Kenya's been, I think she's on the call, so I want to do a quick shout out to her for all her help. And of course, Mayor of Lemon Grove, Raquel and I have had a long relationship of working together. And there have been different Tuskegee Airmen along the way that have been helpful. And then I've had the good fortune, I think some of you know Smitty, Ed Smith. Ed, or Smitty, worked for me for a number of years. He's been a great friend to me. And so, a lot of this is making yourself available. I mean, it's been stated before, and having an open ear. But see, I don't want you to say stuff. I want results. I want to be able to look back and say I actually impacted it and changed for the better. That's why I stepped out from the Republican Party and from others to do the murder felony rewriting the bill. That's why I've done things that are uncharacteristic of Republicans, because justice and fairness is a national trait. It's not owned by any party.
Thank you, Joel. Ben, who are your influencers in terms of what the concerns and the concerns?
Well, of course, I made reference to Urban League, and of course, the late Cecil Stepp was somebody that was a really good friend, and also that I worked a lot. But I think the number one source that I go to is a really good friend of mine, Leon Williams, that I've known practically all my life, and he is somebody that I speak to quite often. Ellen Nash and I have become very good friends, and of course, in recent history, we have worked on a lot of issues together. With Tony Young has also been a very good friend of mine, and we speak often. Another person that, of course, not only is very active in labor, but also on issues related to the African American community, Kenan Samaji and his late wife, good, excellent friends that I have a lot of respect for. That also, they're social activists that fight for the community at every level, and of course, I go to them often for. But mainly, look, we have a really good relationship with the constituency of our district, and we hear from all our residents on a daily basis, and we make ourselves very accessible to them, and we work very hard with them to make sure that we address their issues and listen carefully to the things that are most important to them.
Thank you, Ben. And Nora, who are you listening to?
So, I really pride myself in listening to people not only who support me, but also the people who are not supporting me, right? Because as a public servant, I feel like I have a responsibility to listen to all voices. And so, even Ellen and Elise, who are on the different side of this election, I work with them continuously, and we're doing some work with nonprofits right now as we move forward. People like Councilwoman Monica Montgomery, I consider my friends. We started working on bail reform back when she was in ACLU many, many years ago. Dr. Akila Weber, who I've gotten to know much better. One of my favorites that I like to hear from is Tamika, because she heads up the MLK Democratic Club, and we always haven't seen eye to eye. but she's fierce and she tells the truth and she tells me how it is. And I listen to her because what we need is to hear from all perspectives to be able to make the best decisions. Genevieve, of course, I consider her a wonderful friend. Many of you, folks like Omar Passons, before he went into the county, was somebody that I worked with and talked to often. And then people like Ethel Larkin, people who were on the front of our schools, the folks who are on the ground providing the food for our kids, who tell me what's happening and what we need to be doing different to make sure that we address some of the inequities in our communities. And I have a lot of young people, especially at the college, who have been able to work with as well. So thank you for that question.
Excellent. And thank you all for your answers to these questions. Kevin.
I'd like to, Soleil? You're on mute.
Hello, everyone. I need to just acknowledge that Tara had to leave the call. She actually had a previous engagement and still made the time to come on this forum. So we just want to publicly thank her for taking the time to answer the questions submitted by our subject matter experts. And moving forward with the questions of the forum, we're going to obviously have to exclude her from asking. Okay? And now we can move forward.
Okay. This is a question about, well, let me read it. The County of Riverside and supervisors unanimously voted 5-0 to declare racism as a public health crisis. What are your thoughts about this as it relates to the County of San Diego? And how will you use your position, power, privilege, and authority to provide an ethical response to public health in the Black community? And I'd like to start with Ben.
Thank you very much. I support that action. I would do something similar without a doubt, but also not only take that action, but develop a plan on how we're going to respond to that action. So it's not enough to call attention, but I think it's also important, equally important, to convene a stakeholders group to address how we can address that inequity in our society, address racism in our society, address the issues that have for so long gone unanswered. After the end of the Civil War, after the Emancipation Proclamation, the promise was for 40 acres and a mule. Nothing has been done to address that in 150 years. And I really want to take this issue seriously and work with all of you to develop an approach on how we are going to address the issue of equity and racism in our county.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Nora?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. You know, the Board of Supervisors just recently approved, right, the Office of Equity. And I think that that's a great priority of where we can work together, because what I think needs to happen in the County of San Diego as a whole, absolutely with healthcare, we need to address this issue and the disparities, because we know what those disparities are and how we make sure that we continue to do outreach and provide the resources that our communities need, make sure that it's culturally competent, making sure that we're meeting people where we're at. But what needs to happen is it has to be intentional, and there has to be accountability to make sure that each of the departments are actually addressing the inequities that exist in the county as we speak now. And so making sure that we have the staff and infrastructure, making sure that the policies that are created, people understand that this is how the board is strategically looking at the region, and that this is important. It's just as important as in Southeast as it is in parts of La Jolla or anywhere else. And so we need to prioritize that as a community, and as a Board of Supervisor, I would do that, because I think that the only way we're going to be able to make systemic change is for us to do it together. And some of the stuff is going to be tough, but we have to take it head on, and we have to make sure that resources are coming into our communities, and we're partnering with our nonprofit centers to be able to do the work that needs to happen as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, we just saw that the Office of Racial Equity has been created, and we have the Leon Williams Human Relations Commission. I think giving them a chance to work, making sure that they have all the resources that they need to move forward, and encouraging the public to come forward and share their concerns and their worries. But, too often in the state legislature, we have duplication and we never get anything done because we're paying everybody to do it, but there's no resources to actually get the work done. We've created these. Let's make sure that they are supported and that they're successful. And I think getting that out into the community so they know that there's a path, we're taking it seriously, and they have an opportunity to step up and improve their community.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for your answers. I'd like to turn it over to Soleil.
Hello all. At this time, we are going to open up questions to the audience to submit about questions, and we're going to pull 2 to 3. So I'm going to take a minute or 2 to pull questions from the audience, and then I'm going to hand it off to Cheryl to ask those questions to all the candidates.
While she's doing that, I just want to thank everyone who has been involved with this project. I think it's very important for the community at large and also to understand the issues that are important to the Black community when it comes to looking at the County of San Diego.
I just want to say thank you for having us. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that has happened with COVID is that people actually now are understanding how valuable and how important the county is because of the needs that we have, right? And so this is so important. Thank you for doing that.
Okay.
Here's a question for us. What is your stance on the census full count? And presently, what are you personally doing to ensure that we do in fact get a full count on the U.S. census of the residents in San Diego County?
You're muted. I can't.
I beg your pardon. I didn't tell you who I'd like to start with first. Let's start with Dan.
Yeah, we're just.
Thank you so much, Dan. If you would.
Can you ask the question one more time?
Yes. What are you personally doing to ensure that we get a full count of the number of residents in San Diego County, a full census count?
Well, first of all, last year we started by funding $90 million of state funds to help hire, going through local community-based organizations and several organizations to help push the census count promotion. You know that Trump largely underfunded the count, and this is very important to our state. So our state has set up a lot of money to help with the count. I have worked to do some public service announcements through the Senate, through the different media. I have been, actually, we even did a caravan around the community where we put census information on our cars, and we drove around in a parade to bring awareness to this. So I've done it through different media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, everything we can to get the word out, and also in getting people activated to be part of the information outreach effort. That's also been very important. So this is very important. We've put a lot of resources into that.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Joel.
Well, as a private citizen, I went ahead and filled it out right away. But, you know, it's important that everybody fills it out because this changes what's allocated to us as a state and as a county. It's in our best interest to have it fully filled out so that we get access to grants and monies that are out there for the purpose of serving those communities. I do not understand why people don't want to participate when it's actually in their best interest.
Nora.
Thank you for that question. You know, I wish this census was different and things were happening not under COVID. A couple of reasons why. Number one is because the federal government has been against us in this whole process and trying to make sure that everyone in our communities is counted, including our undocumented population. I have been at the front lines. I serve on the board of NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials. We are working with African-American elected officials across the nation to ensure that we, from the beginning, a year and a half ago, we were writing letters to the president and making sure to ensure that everybody was going to be counted. And then a couple of weeks ago, we get the president saying that now the date has been moved to September 30th. So I'm using every platform that I have in my power, including making sure that through Southwestern College, we're reminding our students to get counted, making sure that when we're calling our voters in our communities, that we're asking people when we're talking on the phone, if they are participating, giving them the information. I've participated in numerous caravans that people have done using social media, supporting the count, doing the work in English and Spanish, and trying to get as much information out to the community because people are scared. People don't know what the census is. And a lot of people don't trust government anymore because government hasn't given them a reason to actually trust them. And so we as elected officials and public officials have a responsibility to go out there and help and do the outreach that we can and do whatever we can in our resources to ensure that everyone's counted, because it's going to have a direct impact on our next representation and the amount of resources that are going to come specifically to the county. So thank you for asking that question. And I'm looking forward to continuing the efforts in this arena.
Thank you, Nora. Black and brown residents experience an array of environmental injustices in our community. How will you use an equity lens to address our region's environmental concerns, and what metrics will you use to measure this equity? Let's start with Joel.
You know, I've always had community coffees in town halls, and I've always invited people to come in with concerns, and that's not going to change. You know, I want to lift the people in my community. I want to solve the problems, but I really rely on people stepping up and sharing that with me. And if people don't tell me, then it's hard for me to anticipate what their wants or needs or how they're being treated. But I think if you look at my legislative career, I've written bill after bill supporting justice for everybody. And I think that that's why, part of the reason why I received the Chuck Nichols Pierre Fraser Bridge Builder Award a couple of years ago. And I'm very proud of that award because it looks at me as a person. It doesn't look at where I live or what I do, but it looks at the actions of what I've been able to accomplish while in office. And, you know, I'm proud of it. So I'll continue along that vein.
Thank you so much, Joel. Nora.
Yeah, I'm really proud to have the endorsement of the Environmental Health and Justice Coalition and the Climate Defenders Action Fund, organizations that are on the ground working to advocate for environmental justice. I serve on the board of Mothers Out Front and have been doing this work most recently with the anti-fracking in our communities, which really impacted poor Black people and Latinos, and the impact that these oil drills were going to have in our communities. And so I've been doing this work for many years. This is not something new for me. I will always stand up for the community and do what's right. You know, people keep talking about what they've done in areas like Barrio Logan and San Isidro, but the truth is that we haven't had the representation that we need. Air pollution is higher in these areas than anywhere else. Our sewage issue with the Tijuana River continues to be a challenge, and people who have been in these roles for decades, you know, haven't been able to have the answer. So I think we need a fresh new pair of eyes to come in there, to bring communities together, to advocate for resources from the federal government, to make sure that we look at things from environmental justice. So as we're looking at this transportation hub, that we not are only looking at, do we have a system in place, but are we creating jobs that have PLAs? Are we making sure that we have an opportunity to have folks be able to afford transportation? Are we looking at making sure that when we're talking about, you know, transitioning our communities, that we really are addressing the needs that they have? And so for many years, I think there's still a lot of work to be done, and I'm looking forward to doing that. Thank you, Nora.
Ben.
Now, you cut out when, in the first part of your question, you cut out in here. So if you could please restate the question so I could hear all of it.
Sure. I'm going to read it so it's
Sorry
so you
about
get the same thing that everyone else said. No worries.
There's some cutting out that's happening.
How will you use an equity lens to address our region's environmental concerns, and what metrics will you use to measure equity?
Well, currently at the state level, we have funded through the cap and trade program. And of course, not only did I vote for it, but I also ensured that we would have an ability to measure air quality in our district. Because of the border, it provided unique challenges. So I made sure that we got additional funding for the border. We have funded organizations like the Environmental Health Coalition, Casa Familiar, organizations that are setting up monitoring stations. Those monitoring stations will help us identify where emissions are coming from, and it will help us qualify for cap and trade funding to try to begin to address those emissions. One of the problems that we have is the bayfront. We have bunker fuel that boats burn that creates horrible air quality along the bay. It provides horrible air quality not only for Barrio Logan, but for Coronado as well. National City. These areas are deeply affected by poor air quality because of bunker fuel. We have to get these boats off of bunker fuel and connected to our electrical grid that will provide clean energy to power these boats while they're in dock. After they leave our community, bunker fuel will not have an impact here, but we have to make sure that we address that problem. But largely, I was a co-author for SB 100, and in that bill by 2045, we're going to work to reduce emissions. So when people talk about nothing has been done, they really don't know what our state has been working on and what we have done. This is going to bring real money to our communities to address air quality, and largely we're going to be removed from having to depend on fossil fuels for our electrical grid entirely, which would also help to provide better and cleaner air quality. And of course, putting more EVs on the road are going to help with that as well.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you all of you, all candidates, for your time and your candor in answering these questions. I'll turn it over to Soleil. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. And yes, again, thank you all for attending this forum and taking the time to answer these questions submitted by our community. And it's important that our community is heard and that you're here to use your voice and listen. And as we come to a close, I'd like to give the candidates an opportunity for closing statements, starting with Nora.
Me and the issue of unmuting myself. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for everyone for the opportunity to be here. It really has been a pleasure for me to have a conversation with all of you. For more than 20 years, like I mentioned, I've been dedicating my life to really focusing on removing barriers from underserved communities and through civic engagement, public policy, and community organizing. I've been on the ground working in partnership with our communities on the front lines, and I want to bring that experience to the board. This is a really important election for us, not just at the national level, but it's the first time in 25 years that this district will have an opportunity to elect a new supervisor. I'm really proud to share with all of you that we recently got out of a field poll, and David Binder Research, which is the Obama pollster, said that we are ahead of our opponent by double digits. I don't take anything for granted. All of my life, I've worked really hard to move forward and to get the work done that it needs to get done on behalf of our communities. I'm going to continue to do that. I'm really honored to have the support of many folks in our community. I forgot to mention the Earl Gilliam Bar Association, which is another organization that I'm really proud to have. Controller Betty Yee, Fiona Ma, Lorena Gonzalez. And what I want to do is want to continue to work hard to earn the support of voters in District 1. I know that this is a very important election that's going to create a direction for our communities. I'll be working together with all of you to bring meaningful change. And I want to make sure that people know that in me, you're going to have somebody who's going to work hard. And if you need to reach me, you can reach me at noravargas.com or at teamnora@noravargas.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you. Ben?
Thank you very much. I think the difference in this election is the work ethic I'm going to bring to public office, the work ethic I've been bringing. I started my first business when I was 12 years old. I started delivering the San Diego Union when I was 13 years old, getting up every day at 4:30 in the morning to try to deliver 143 houses by 6 a.m. And my entire life, I have been working hard to put myself through college. I lived in a van for 2 years at UCLA because I couldn't afford to pay rent. And as an elected official, I'm one of those that gets results. I have helped to build thousands of quality, affordable housing units. I have helped to transform neighborhoods like Barrio Logan, San Isidro, all across my district, building libraries, shopping centers, things that provide quality jobs. Otay Mesa has created an exciting manufacturing district that provides jobs. I have worked in so many areas to really push legislation that provides opportunities and jobs, that breaks down, that works on eliminating racism. There's a real difference between just talk and action. With me, they're going to get action.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And then Joel?
You bet. So, look, for too long in this district, we've gone without anybody representing us. You know, I've gone all through the district. People have had simple problems that should have been solved that weren't solved. And I would ask that people go to my website, my campaign website, because you can see a list of over 17 testimonials where I help people close the gap for them. I made government work for them. And it's very important to me that we represent our constituents to the best of our ability so they have a voice at County Hall. The other part is I'm proud to have 28 local elected officials in the district endorsing me, and over 3,000 ordinary citizens who have sent me their endorsements. This is a grassroots campaign. I'm not supported by the downtown. I'm supported by the people inside the district, and that's why I did so well in the primary. My cell phone has always been on every one of the ballots. I encourage people to call me if they have an issue, and I'm here to serve you. And I want to thank you again for hosting me here and allowing me a voice to speak at your table. And I would encourage and welcome your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joel. And then Tara's not here, so she will not be able to close out. I wish we had more time. I wish we truly had more time.
Do you want me to talk for Kara?
No.
Okay, just checking.
Thank you for offering.
I wanted to thank you, and all the listeners have a great day, and I hope everybody's staying safe. Thank you very much.
So we're still closing. Thank you.
Oh,
yeah, no worries. Give me a brief moment. So I want to thank all the candidates for participating in today's forum, and I will turn it over to the BAPAC San Diego Chair, Ellen Nash.
Am I on? Well, I wanted to say thank you, wonderful, amazing candidates for attending our forum. We are so humbly honored to have you here at our forum today. And I would like to also remind you that BAPAC will be hosting 3 more forums. We will be doing the congressional next month. We'll be also doing the mayor's race, I believe in October, and also the city attorney race. So we have 3 more forums that we will be hosting. Also, I wanted to remind people of the importance of voting. Given some of the traction we're getting with regards to voter suppression, we are encouraging everyone on this call, everybody that's on Facebook Live, everybody that's on YouTube, get your ballot, make sure you're registered to vote. And our deadline should be to start out, which should be October 5th. We're going to make October the month for voting. We're not going to leave it to by chance of November 3rd. Don't wait till November 3rd. When you receive that ballot in the mail, fill it out, complete it online, and get it in by October 5th. So we want to ensure that every vote gets counted and every vote matters. Our own Tamar Rice's mom lost the race by 331 votes, a 0.5%. And we want to make sure that we come out in a strong way and vote overwhelmingly. So there will be no questions asked. And again, we want to thank you all for being here. And we want you to have a great weekend and have a great day. And we wish all the candidates success and best of luck. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You guys did all
Bye-bye.
great.
It's good to see everyone.
Thank you so much.